Hi everyone, it's March 3rd, 2017. We're preparing for Venus to go retrograde, and I just wanted to record just a brief audio to go a little bit more in depth into Venus retrograde. Retrograde because Venus retrogrades are very, very important. They're a time when we go through a values reassessment. We find out what is truly meaningful to us, and this particular retrograde will see perhaps what we have neglected and need to bring back into focus, because at the end of this retrograde, the Sabian symbols imply a reward, reaping a reward and ripeness and things coming to a new fullness. So that's really nice. So the retrograde again is March 4th, 2017 at 4:10 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:10 a.m. Universal Time. The retrograde occurs at 13 degrees of Aries, 8 minutes, which is 14 Aries. The Sabian symbol for 14 Aries is a serpent coiling near a man and a woman. So if you have in your chart planets, basically anywhere from 10 to 18, 10 to 17, 18 of a cardinal sign, Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer, the Venus retrograde will be heavily activated in your chart. I say this because these are the squares. These make 90-degree angles to the degree of the retrograde, and that aspect, a square produces the greatest amount of change. Of course, if you have the conjunction at 14 Aries or within that range, that plus or minus is about 3 degrees, 3 or 4 degrees, or 14 Libra plus or minus there, certainly that will be, this retrograde will be quite something for you. And remember, it's going to somewhere very nice. So the retrograde will be in effect. Venus will station direct on April 15th, 2017. It's at 5:18 a.m. Eastern Time, 10:18 a.m. Universal Time at 26 degrees Pisces, 54 minutes, which is 27 degrees Pisces. The Sabian symbol for 27 Pisces is a harvest moon illuminates the sky. This is where we get the reaping the reward, the full illumination, the ripeness energetic that I mentioned. But even though the retrograde is only in effect, well, the planet is retrograde is the way I should say that. Venus is retrograde for 42 days. The entirety of Venus retrograde actually is much longer. It began on January 30th, 2017, and it lasts until May 18th, 2017. So what does that mean? And what is planets in shadow, and why don't I talk about this with other planets? Because I really don't. Sometimes with the Mercury retrograde, but because I spend so much time in the shadows with the black moon, I don't really like to pay much attention to um, retrogrades of planets and in their shadows or eclipses. But you kind of have to pay attention to eclipses. Anyway, okay, so the way it works is the planet will go in shadow when it reaches the degree that it's going to go direct at. So it went into shadow on January 30th when Venus was at um, 27 Pisces. And that, if you remember back to January 30th, that was kind of a rough time. Even though none of the planets were retrograde at that time, Venus was began its shadow, but none of the planets were retrograde. Mercury and Pluto had just made conjunction. Venus had just made conjunction with Chiron, the wounded healer, and Mars had just entered Pisces. So if you think back, it was not that nice. It was just kind of a really dark time. Um, and so when we look to when it comes out of its shadow, that's when the planet gets makes it back to the degree where it went retrograde. So when it gets back to 14 Aries, and that's again May 18th. So the dynamics in play are, first, when it hits the shadow, we get the harvest moon illuminates the sky. That tells us where it begins and really where it ends. Fullness. Um, we're going to have full moon, full light, so to speak, on the areas of life that Venus rules: relationships, love, beauty, comfort, feelings of beauty and appearance, um, security, financial security, money issues. Money is certainly highlighted during Venus retrograde. The Illuminati are certainly highlighted in this Venus retrograde, as I mentioned in the Oracle report today. But when we break it all down, things that were neglected are coming to light. Things that perhaps have been coming between people in relationships, wedges, interferences, barriers, blockages, archonic interference, Watiko, that will be revealed during the retrograde and then come to a new place by the time that Venus is fully out of its shadow. So truly, the status of, if there are if the status of relationships, and this can be any kind of partnership, professional, personal, romantic, if that status of that relationship is under question, or even if it's not, because everything undergoes the renewal and the reassessment of Venus, any values that are out of alignment, if we are placing too much emphasis on something over another and that's really not within a good balance or within a natural balance, all those things are going to be revealed. And with wisdom, the serpent coiling near a man and a woman, the serpent of wisdom, in one meaning. So this is where we know what it's all about, but we know that there's going to be a tremendous values reassessment within all of those things. On March 15th, we want to note that date. I believe that is the day when the executive order that was maintaining the debt ceiling, I think that goes out of effect, and so we could see something on the markets with that. We need to look more into that and what's actually happening with that, because I think that was set in place by Obama just before he left office. So it's a date we're going to watch. It's rather a particular date too, isn't it? March 15th. But back to the retrograde. So we have the entirety of this time period, 42 days long, and I do focus on that full length of time with it because it has such dramatic effect on us. Venus, well, it affects so many areas of our lives, our emotions, how we feel about ourselves, how our relationships affect us, what level of comfort we have with ourselves and our feeling of home. It's very personal, and it can get very, very personalized, especially with confidence and security and self-esteem and the lack thereof. It can come out. But remember, all of this is coming out to be illuminated and to bring wisdom. Certainly, that's what probably the name of this retrograde should be, the illumination of wisdom. Perhaps through division initially, the serpent perhaps coming between the man and woman. Now, when Venus goes retrograde, at the time when it goes retrograde tonight on March 4th, overnight, the moon is going to be at 30 degrees of Taurus. The Sabian symbol of that degree is a peacock parading on the terrace of an old castle. Why am I looking at that? Well, because we want to get as much data as we can about the retrograde, and so the exact time of that it stops, in astrological terms, and appears to move backward is precise, and so we can look at the moon and the degree of the moon for even more information about what that imprint is like, what the retrograde will be like during that period of time, especially the 42-day period. So we know that Venus rules beauty and form and shape and color and what's attractive. Certainly, peacock embodies all of those things. Peacock can symbolize egocentricity when it's in the extreme. It's really about beauty, which is very Venusian. And so perhaps our assessment of beauty, what our value of beauty, what the meaning of beauty is to us truly, will become enhanced or expanded while Venus is retrograde. I kind of like that idea. So just a little about not even a full hour after Venus stations retrograde, the moon is going to go into Gemini. And that means it's going to oppose the black moon transiting through Sagittarius. That means it's a black moon day because Gemini and Sagittarius are opposites, and the black moon always imposes the opposite. It engages the dualities. The polarities really is the better term. The black moon is discharging at the time of Venus retrograde. It will be discharging two men playing chess. Now, when we look at the opposite sign, where the moon will be, it'll be at 3 Gemini, the Garden of the Tuileries in Paris. What this tells us is that there is an imprint, especially for tomorrow, March 4th, but to some degree in effect during the entire retrograde, that engages the energetics of the transit of the black moon and the moon. So when the Gemini Sagittarius polarity of the black moon is activated, definitions, boundaries, who are you, be you, what's meaningful to you, what do you want to cultivate? These will be the themes that we will have tomorrow, March 4th, but also throughout the retrograde period. And the topic of the black moon in Sagittarius is a topic for another recording, and perhaps I'll be able to do that later on today. But I just wanted to give it a little bit of an overview, more in depth, because I couldn't write all of this in the report, and maybe have a different or a fuller understanding of this Venus retrograde, the harvest moon illuminating the sky.